In this video, we're going to discuss how to improve your comprehension and retention when reading fiction. So earlier in another video, we talked about reading informational material or news articles. And we talked about how the multiple reading process can be used for getting through that kind of information faster, comprehending it better, remembering it better. But what about reading fiction? Anytime you want to read a novel, you can apply a very similar process, the multiple reading process, but we're going to tweak it a little bit. So you would start off with the preview, and the preview is simply getting a summary of the book or the chapter that you're about to read. So if you haven't even started the book, the first thing we do normally before we buy a book is we read maybe the back or the inside flap. We want to get an idea of what we're getting into. Nothing's wrong with that. And actually, I say you take it a step further. For example, if you were reading, let's say, Animal Farm. This is actually the full text of the entire novel, Animal Farm. And let's say someone was reading this on the screen. A lot of people would just copy and paste this into Accelerator, and that's probably not the best way to do it. You want to get an idea, what is this chapter going to be about? Or what is this book going to be about if I'm just starting it out? So what I do before I paste any kind of fiction novel into Accelerator is I check out the Wikipedia page. And I read, maybe I'll just read all of this right here. Maybe I'll copy and paste this into Accelerator. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is I just want to get an idea, what is Animal Farm going to be about? I like to also look at the publication date. I see here 1945, and I can kind of think about what's going on during that time period. I might even search on Wikipedia about the author. So maybe you already know something about George Orwell, and you know he likes to write about politics. And if you're familiar with Animal Farm, it's a political satire. And it's a story about animals with, themes of equality and totalitarianism. And if I was reading this, if I never had any exposure to it before, I definitely want to read this right here because it's going to give me an idea of what it's about. Now, let's say I was a student and I was going to have a really big test on this novel next week or in a few days. I would probably go a little deeper and maybe read a little bit more about this. You see where it says plot summary? Why not read about, the rebellion, Napoleon's rule, humanization, animalism. I see there are 7 things over here, which says the original commandments are. I know there's some kind of commandments going on. So you see how just reading this initial part right here would give me a good amount of information of what this book is going to be about. Now, I already know what some people are thinking. Some people are thinking, well, what about spoilers? Isn't that going to spoil the story? Now, I want to raise your attention to a study that was done in 2011 about spoilers. So here's a headline. This was out of University of California, San Diego, and the headline is appropriately enough, spoiler alert, stories are not spoiled by spoilers. Okay? Now, to kind of summarize what this article is about, and if you want to see this news study, I recommend just Google spoilers are not spoiled by spoilers. Stories are not spoiled by spoilers, and search for maybe University of California, San Diego. You can find the full study through Google. But basically, here's the summary of it. People who flip to the last page of a book before starting it have better intuition. Spoilers don't spoil stories. Contrary to popular wisdom, they actually seem to enhance enjoyment. So basically, they did this study with a lot of students, and they wanted to see if they told students what the story was going to be about, or if they let them read the ending. And they were doing this with mysteries. You see it says here, the same held true with mysteries, or stories that had ironic twists, basically where the ending is really important, some kind of a surprise. They were telling the students, the people that knew ahead of time what was going to happen, they actually enjoyed the story more. So I used to tell my students years ago that, if you don't want to spoil the story, you don't need to do this whole preview, overview, and read of it where you have the opportunity to potentially spoil the story. But now, based on this 2011 study, I'll let you do what you want to do. I recommend definitely get some background on it. Don't be worried if a story gets spoiled for you. You can actually, this study is saying you could probably enjoy it more if you know ahead of time what it's going to be. I'm still looking for more studies on this, but it was actually very interesting, so keep that in mind. So reading ahead of time what Animal Farm is going to be about will probably enhance your enjoyment. It'll make it easier for you to comprehend. Now, let's say you're reading something more difficult than Animal Farm, because Animal Farm is written in relatively modern-day English. What if you're reading something like Hamlet or anything by William Shakespeare? That's in Shakespearean language, and it's hard for a lot of people to understand that. So one way that you can make it easier for yourself is by looking at a website like sparknotes.com. A lot of students know about this already. You can get summaries of each and every single act. So what I would do is I would read the summary for Act 1, Scene 1. I would read that summary first before actually reading Act 1, Scene 1. So the preview is still reading a summary of the book or chapter, and the overview is reading the first sentence of each paragraph in that chapter. Once you've done that, say you're reading on your screen, that's when you can copy and paste and read the entire chapter. When I say copy and paste, I mean copy and pasting into Accelerator. So again, we're still doing the same kind of a process. We start off with a very general summary, and then we do an overview. We get a little more information what it's going to be about by reading the first sentence of each paragraph, or alternatively, reading maybe the SparkNotes summary of each chapter. And reading first sentence will also give you some clues about what's going to happen in that chapter, and then you can simply go to the third step and start reading the entire chapter. It'll make it a lot easier for you to read. You'll actually probably be reading it faster. You'll have better comprehension because you already know what to expect. So keep all of that in mind. Now, I also want you to know about some advanced settings in Accelerator that will help you read faster and with better comprehension when you're reading novels. So let me go over to Accelerator and show you. Let's say I pasted all of Chapter 1 into Accelerator. That's Chapter 1 from Animal Farm. And if I hit the read button, and let's say I change the settings here, I'm going to change it to 500 words a minute, chunk size 3. And let me go click on the advanced section over here. I want to show you what you should probably be checking off when you're reading a fiction novel. First of all, speed variability. You want to have this checked off. Normally, by default, all of these boxes are unchecked, but speed variability, you want to have that there. What it does, it slows down for larger chunks of text and it speeds up for smaller chunks of text, so the average words per minute stays the same. What exactly does this mean? When you're reading something in Orwell's Animal Farm, we all know that in certain paragraphs are going to be longer than others. So on paragraphs like this versus this, this one's obviously a lot bigger, and then you have a lot of dialogue, back and forth dialogue, which are paragraphs in themselves. What that setting does, that we're talking about here, speed variability, what it will do is it will slow down when you get to these bigger paragraphs. This is where, the narrator, George Orwell, comes in and he explains what's going on. Now, it'll go a little faster on the dialogue, where you have like blah, blah, blah said this person, blah, blah, blah said that person. And then what happens is Orwell comes back in, explains what's going on, and then you go back to this back and forth dialogue. So you have short paragraphs, long paragraphs. And when you have that, it's good to vary your speed. And what Accelerator will allow you to do with this advanced setting is change up your speed, slowing down for larger chunks of text and speeding up on smaller chunks. Now, another thing you can do is start a new chunk at the end of sentences and paragraphs. We all know that when you're reading along here, sometimes you get to a period and you see how I have it checked off right here, start a new chunk at the end of sentences and paragraphs. Notice how I have it blinking. I want it to blink 3 words at a time. But you see how right now it just blinked only 1 word? That's because I have this box checked. If I didn't do that, what would happen is it would show this right here and the next 2 words because it's blinking 3 words at a time. But by checking off this box right here, it allows you to basically see where a paragraph or a sentence is ending, and that helps you with your comprehension. Also, a slight pause at the end of sentences and paragraphs, that's also going to help your comprehension because it lets you know that you've completed some kind of an idea. And lastly, another thing you can do here to improve your reading speed through novels is you can skip over stop words. These are words that convey absolutely no meaning. They're words like the, and you can edit that list right over here. That'll help you read faster. That'll help you read with better comprehension. So make sure that you're checking out the advanced section, the advanced settings in Accelerator. I typically recommend that you enable all of these checkboxes here if you're reading novels. So I hope you found the tips helpful in this particular video. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me at paul@irisreading.com.